देखते रहिए, मेरे को खड़ा होना पड़ेगा बार बार।
again, all together, everyone. All together, everyone. Hare Krishna. All together, everyone. One more time. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare
Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nivasesha Sunyavadi Praskatide Satarane Om Aginataminandasya Jana Jana Salakaya Jaksus Militan Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Nama Sri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Sayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Sapandantikam. Mancha Kalpatrubhascha Kripasindubhe Vacha Patitanam Pavinebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Hare Krishna. It's so nice to be in the association of you all, and so many gods we're having. First, I would like to say that I don't feel very comfortable sitting up here on a big stage. I feel much more comfortable if this was down here, but I'd feel actually much more comfortable if I was sitting in the back. But what to do? I guess all we can do at this point is begin talking about the Bhagvatam. And I would like to explain a little bit about the way that I'll give these classes. It's a little different from what I would usually do, because usually what happens is I begin speaking and then we go for almost 2 hours speaking, and it's very difficult for everyone to sit for so long, to concentrate for so long. And the particular nature of this topic is that I've broken up the 2 hours that were together, and today will be a bit more than 2 hours, into 15-minute segments, 15-minute parts, with different types of activities and different things in those parts. And let's see how it works. Are you ready? Yes. I wasn't asking you. What's your name? Anand. Of course you're ready. Your name is Anand. Are you ready, Anand? Oh, very enthusiastic. Is everyone else ready? Okay. It sounded like there was one person who wasn't quite as sure as everyone else. His yes came a little later. It's almost impossible for me, what to speak of people from Bombay, to be on time with things. But I'm going to try in 15-minute segments. So if I'm not doing very well, just say, Bhurijana, you said 15 minutes, but let's see. So I press the button, and in 15 minutes this will go off to remind me. So I would like to first speak about the purpose of the Bhagvatam. What's your thought about the Bhagavatam's purpose? Who will be so brave as to raise their hand? Who will say what the Bhagavatam's purpose, according to you, according to your understanding? What? Yes, Virchandra.
It helps us to get attracted to the activities.
It helps us to get attracted to the activities. That's quite close to what I wanted to say, but not quite. But it was very close, in the right direction. Anyone else like to say? What's your understanding of the purpose of the Bhagavatam? Yes, what's your name? Excuse me? What's your name? Devanshi. Hare Krishna. Were you going to say what the purpose of the Bhagavatam was?
What Krishna said to Arjuna is about the purpose of what Krishna said to Arjuna, that's why you should fight,
Why he should fight, yes. Very good. But that's more the Bhagavad Gita. In the Bhagavatam, the purpose is actually to bring us to Vrindavan. Actually, it's very specific. It's to bring us to Braja. And there's 12 cantos in the Bhagavatam, and the purpose of the first 9 is to lead us very, very carefully and to purify our hearts in such a way and give us the proper conceptions, the proper ideas, that by the time we get to Canto 10, we're ready to hear about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and his activities with the devotees in Sri Vrindavan Dham. Now here's something that Prabhupada said about the Bhagavatam. Please listen carefully. Just like Krishna's Vrindavan Leela. He is playing with cowherd boys. He's dancing with the gopis. So Krishna is so kind that he descends on this planet with his Leela, his activity, so that we can all become attracted. Because we will go where we are attracted. Naturally, what fills our mind will determine how we act. We want to become attracted to Krishna and Sri Vrindavan Dham. It is Krishna's kindness, Prabhupada continues, that he descends with all his paraphernalia before us. Because Vrindavan is such a refined state. It takes such refined, pure, subtle, but even more than pure and subtle, a special kind of mood, of bhakti. One has to be able to cry for Krishna, ultimately. Tatsaraloyam api moolam ekalam. So Krishna comes, just like someone makes an advertisement. He displays something very attractive. So Krishna comes for this purpose, to attract us to go back to home, back to Godhead. He attracts by such activities. He thus attracts the conditioned souls of the material world by displaying the sweetness of his dealings with the residents of Vrindavan. The Bhagvatam, in the Bhagvatam, he attracts us from this place where we're all longing for sweetness. But here, in the words that Srila Prabhupada told us about his Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who used to say that here in this world, there is sand in the sweet rice. Have you ever tasted sweet rice with sand in it? I hope not. Certainly not at the temple. But it ruins everything. So the three verses that we're going to study or hear about and even learn, I hope, some of you probably already know them. They're not very esoteric or they're well-known verses. They're going to be able to help us greatly in our journey back to Godhead. But there's there's a but. You know how when you buy something, they say you'll get this for free and you'll get that for free, but then they have a little star that says, conditions apply. So in the same way, there is one condition that applies for these verses to help us, and that is the reason why I'm giving these classes, because I want these things to enter very deeply into myself, is that we have to be ready to apply them to our life. Not just know the verses, but the knowing the verses and understanding their importance is so important. But then, where they get real significance, or the most significance, is when we apply them to our life. So we're about to start a journey, and then our Jagattarini Mataji, she's going to speak this evening and tomorrow as well about something about what the spiritual world is like. And it is, in an interesting way, something like the material world, this world, because this world is a reflection, but there, the sweet rice has no sand. And that's the great journey that we're on. We're at different stages of the journey. Each and every one of us is an individual, but we're all want to increase the desire to be there. So these verses will help us. If what? Who said that? Now, lots of people said it. Okay. But we really want, of course, just knowing them and hearing them. I've heard Prabhupada say, just hearing the sound vibration, you don't even have to know the meaning. What to speak of apply it is so powerful. But applying it really helps. But as we shall hear, it's not so easy. But yet, if we can do it, we are very fortunate. So a little more on the goal of the Bhagvatam. There is one verse in the second chapter of the first canto, Savai Pungsan Paradharmo, Yatir Bhaktir Ahokchaje. If you perform what real dharma is, what real religious activity is this bhakti, devotion to Adhokchaje, to the Lord who is beyond everything of this world. And that devotion has to be ahaitukiya patiyata. It has to be without any motive other than to please the Lord, to please Krishna. And if it is on that level, then it brings the satisfaction that we are longing for. So, what does that pure devotion look like on the highest, when it's performed on the highest platform of love for Krishna? There is one description of when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he, in the 7th chapter of Adi Lila, why does a child cry like that? Now, you can tell by the power of the calling out that there's no pain, there's no difficulty. But why? What is the meaning of that cry? We'll ask an experienced mother. Attention, and then once you have the attention, what do you want? Love? Not yet. You already have the love, but you want whatever it is that you want, and you want that to happen now. Huh? Care. Yes, it may be care, it may be a toy, it may be this, it may be to stay inside, it may be to go outside, it may be to get something to eat, but I want it and I want it now. When we can cry for Krishna, but not in a demanding way, but in a pleading way, tatra loyamapi mula mekalam, we will get our way. He is very, very kind. Yayatamam prapadyante. But anyway, what does it look like when someone is actually in love with Krishna, fully in the mood of the resonance of Vrindavan? What does it actually look like? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was speaking to Prakasananda Saraswati in Benares, and he was a Mayavadi, I'll have to keep within my 15 minutes. I'll have to explain it very quickly. But he said, why? You're a sannyasi. Your name is Sri Krishna Chaitanya. You've taken sannyas from Kesava Bharati Maharaj, and yet you don't associate with us, other sannyasis. And not only that, you don't study Vedanta. Instead, you chant and you dance with a bunch of fanatics. Why? And Mahaprabhu said, my Guru Maharaj told me I shouldn't study Vedanta. He said, Morka Tumi, Toma Nahika Vedanta. You shouldn't study Vedanta, but what should you do? Krishna mantra japa sada. You should always chant Krishna's names, the Krishna mantra, because this, a mantra sar, it is the essence. It contains the essence of everything. So he continued to explain to Prakasananda Saraswati that he began to chant always, but he found himself in ecstasy and dancing and crying and falling to the ground. And his hair is standing on end just by associating with Krishna through his holy names. So he said, Mahaprabhu said, and I went to my Guru Maharaj and said, what kind of mantra have you given me that has turned me into a madman? It has covered my common sense. It has covered my knowledge. It makes me do all these things. And Sri Ishwara Puripad said, very good. It is the nature of this mantra to turn everyone into a madman, in a sense, to bring everyone to the platform of ecstasy. The holy names can do that. You keep chanting. And that's what Mahaprabhu wanted to give us. Now, what is the internal consciousness of someone who's chanting and is acting that way? Because if you do that on the streets of Melbourne or any other streets, you'll probably get arrested. If you start crying and falling to the ground and laughing, they'll lock you up very quickly. But what's the internal consciousness of someone who is in that kind of ecstasy? Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains what it is. I've just turned off the beeper. We're getting close. I've turned it on again. It's a symptom of love of God. This is what he's internally seeing when he's acting externally in that way. Oh, that thief Krishna, the son of Yashoda, he has entered the house to steal the fresh butter. Grab him. Keep him away. And hearing these menacing words spoken by the elderly gopi, Krishna immediately prepares to leave the house. But the devotee, who is seeing this pastime in his heart, he laughs in ecstasy, but suddenly he can no longer see Krishna. He then cries in great lamentation, oh, I have achieved the greatest fortune in the world, and now it has suddenly slipped from my hands. I can no longer see Krishna. Thus the devotee cries loudly, oh, my Lord, where are you? Give me my answer. Where are you? And the Lord answers, my dear devotee, I heard your loud complaint, and so I have again come before you. Upon seeing Krishna again, the devotee begins to sing, today my life has become perfect. Thus overwhelmed with transcendental bliss, he begins to dance like a madman. So that's the internal cause of his external symptoms. And also in the same BBT purport that included that, there's a recommendation from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur that we study the following verse from the Padyavali of Rupa Goswami. Let the people who just talk and talk and talk say whatever we like, whatever they like. We shall pay them no attention. Thoroughly maddened by the ecstasy of the intoxicating beverage of love for Krishna, we shall enjoy life, running about, rolling on the ground, and dancing in ecstasy. So no rolling on the ground on Swanston Street, please, unless that's really your deep emotion. And that verse was written by Sri Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who we won't speak much about now, but was such a powerful, probably the greatest scholar in all of India. Okay, we probably went 1 or 2 minutes over, but that's the end of part 1. Now we're going to begin part 2. You ready? This is an introduction to the first verse that we're going to look at. So please put the verse up. So the goal is to help us move towards love for Krishna. And that's the Bhagavatam's goal, and therefore these 3 verses from the Bhagavatam are meant to help us in that goal. Is it up yet? No, but just coming. There's Giriraj Govinda. He'll certainly help us. But I'll tell you the verse. We have 15 minutes to talk about this verse. Akama sarva kama va. Raise your hand if you know this verse. Moksha kama udaradi. Tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusa para. Is there a way to make it a little bit bigger and therefore easier to read? I have a feeling not. Okay, but first we'll talk about the first line, because I'm going to ask you to try and memorize this verse. So look at it carefully. Akama sarva kama va. Akama means one who has no material desires. Usually, one would say akama means one who has no desires, but our great acharyas have explained this verse in the context that it was meant. It means one who is beyond all material desires. That means a pure devotee. What does it mean to be beyond material desires? Really, it means what we just heard. Because right now, if we try to be, from now on, I'm not going to desire anything on the material level. That will probably last about 7 seconds. As long as it usually happens when I say from now on, when I chant my japa, I'm going to listen to everything, or the whole Maha Mantra, and how long does that last me? Usually not very long before my mind drifts to something else. But akama means one who is beyond all material desires and fixed so strongly in the desire to love Krishna. Sarvakama, second word, means one who has all material desires, who is filled with material desires. And then va, either one or the other, and then mokshakama in the second line. Mokshakama means, what does mokshakama mean? But I have an idea. Just raise your hand. That will make it easier. What does mokshakama mean, even without looking? Yes. Desire to get free from the sufferings of material life. Udaradi. So whether one is akama, free from all material desires, or sarvakama, filled with material desires, or just having no material desires, but wanting to get free from, liberated and free from the sufferings of material existence. Udaradi means someone whose intelligence is, udara means very broad, very great. Di, intelligence, udaradi. His intelligence is very great. So one whose intelligence is very, very great, whether he's full of material desires, has no material desires and fixed in devotion, or he just wants to get free from material suffering. Such a person, the third verse, Tivrena Bhakti Yogena. Tivrena means with great strength, with great force, with great power, with great determination, with great desire. Bhakti Yogena, he performs Bhakti Yogena, Bhakti to the Lord. And Yajeta means he, by devotional service to the Lord, Yajeta, he is worshiping the Purusham Param, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's worshiping. Regardless if one is full of desires, wants to get free from material existence, and that's his desire, or is a pure devotee, perfectly pure, the activity will be the same. To worship the Lord, but not just ordinary worship, but tivrena, with great force, with great focus, like a laser. He should put his energy, he, she, whoever, put his energy into worshiping the Supreme Lord. This is spoken to Sukadeva Goswami a little later in another 15-minute segment. We will explain something about the context in which he spoke this. But Tivrena, the usual given example of Tivrena, without looking, what does Tivrena mean? Raise your hand. Yes. Very intense, yes, with great force. And the example that's usually given is, has anyone ever been to Gomukh in the Himalayas? Yes, only us two. Did you like it there? Did you bathe there in the water? Yes? It's so cold, you don't even know whether it's hot or cold when you're in it. And these huge icebergs, chunks of ice, are being pushed by the force of the Ganga. How long did you stay in? Or let me put it in the other way, in the more practical. How quickly did you get out? Just, but it feels so good when you're out. Yes, then your body is energized like anything. But that water coming from the Ganga's source at Gomukh has so much power. It's pushing boulders. It's pushing big, big icebergs because of its power. And when we perform bhakti in an intense, as Prabhu said, in an intense way like that, anything, if our determination is strong, Tivra bhakti. What does Tivra mean?
Intense.
With great force. Whatever is in our way of loving Krishna will be pushed aside. Just like the great boulders and icebergs are pushed aside at the source of the Ganga. What is the source of the Ganga? Raise your hand. What's it called, that place? Raise your hand, raise your hand. Yes. Gomukh. Why is it called Gomukh? Does anyone know? We have to, yes, I know it is called Gomukh, but that's not why it's called Gomukh. Raise your hand though. Otherwise, let's see, yeah, there's a corner so far on the back. We'll make you stand in the corner. You have to raise your hand. Why is it called Gomukh? Because, I'll tell you, because the big glacier where the water is coming from is in the shape of a cow. It's a cow's mouth. Gomukh. Now, Srila Prabhupada comments on this verse in his purport. He speaks about akama, what akama means. In the mundane field, such an outlook of doing good to others. Now I'm going to ask you what you remember from this, and to see if you really are listening. In the mundane field, such an outlook of doing good to others in the form of society, community, family, country, or humanity is a partial manifestation of the same original feeling in which a pure living entity feels happiness by the happiness of the Supreme Lord. Okay, what is Prabhupada saying right there? Raise your hand. Who will raise their hand first? Oh, someone way in the back. Yes, holding a little baby. But we won't be able to hear you, and that we heard. Hare Krishna, sweet. There's a good feeling when you help others. There's a good feeling. Even though people do it for the motive of having that good feeling, but there's a good feeling in helping others. So that, if it is a good feeling of doing something just for someone else, just imagine Just imagine the ecstasy that comes from doing good for no other reason than to please Krishna. That's what Prabhupada is saying. He's pointing us. If this in the material world, where everything we do good for others, there's some selfish, something in it for me. But when we do something just for Krishna's pleasure, in bhakti, that is the natural position of the soul, and that is what akama is. Such superb, he continues, such superb topmost feelings were exhibited by the damsels of Brajabhumi for the happiness of the Lord. The gopis loved the Lord, loved Krishna, without any return. And this is the perfect exhibition of the akama spirit. The kama spirit, or the desire for one's own satisfaction, is fully exhibited in the material world, whereas the spirit of akam is fully exhibited in the spiritual world. Raise your hand if you think you understand what Prabhupada said. I caught you with that one. Well, that means everyone. Raise your hand if you think you understand what Prabhupada said. Okay, we'll do it the other way. Raise your hand if you don't understand. Now, you can't be neutral in this one. Raise your hand if you didn't understand what Prabhupada said. Okay. I'll read it again. You have to listen very carefully, okay? What's your name? Agrit? Adrit. What does Adrit mean? Do you know the English translation? Please, a little louder.
Someone who supports others but doesn't need support.
Wow. That sounds like a name of Krishna, who supports others but doesn't need anyone else's support. Nityo Nityanam, Chaitanas Chaitananam. Here's what Prabhupada said, the last part. The feeling when you're giving to Krishna for nothing other than Krishna's pleasure is exhibited perfectly in the spiritual world. I'm saying it in a simpler way. For the pleasure of Krishna, and that's the mood of the spiritual world perfectly exhibited by the Braja Gopis. Just everything for Krishna. And the kama spirit, everything for me, the desire for one's own satisfaction, is fully exhibited in the material world. In the spiritual world, everything is for Krishna. In the material world, selfishness. Everything is for me. Is that clearer? Adrit Prabhu? Good. Now there's one comment, and we're doing relatively well with the time here, from Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Very interesting on this. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, akam means a pure devotee. Jiva Goswami, in his Sandarbha, says that akama means a person whose only happiness is the happiness of the Supreme Lord. And the word sarvakama, so this is what akama means. What does akama mean? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Yes. Ones whose desire is only to please him. No selfishness at all. And the word sarvakama includes all desires in general. What does sarvakama mean? Raise your hand. Oh yeah, I should have said raise your hand and wait till I point to someone before. Okay. But yes, you all get 100% top of class, number one in class. And moksha kama is mentioned separately in order to cut down people's thought that if you want desire for moksha, it's not a desire, but no. He says that they desire liberation. They're more filled with desires than even a person desiring material comfort. since it follows directly after the word sarvakama. So you can think of where you are in this. Are you akama, sarvakama, or mokshakama? Or 20% this, 40% that, 60% this, or whatever. I think we got 120% there, but never mind. And then he explains what the udaradi is. It means very intelligent. An intelligent person makes Bhagavan Krishna the subject of one's devotion, whether he is without desires or with desires. Now, if you do that, that is udaradi. Then you are very intelligent, regardless of where you stand on this, whether you're akama, sarvakama, or mokshakama. If you worship Krishna, then you are very intelligent. And not worshiping the Lord is a sign of foolish intelligence. But that bhakti should be strong. What is the word that means strong and forceful and intense? Tivrena. Without the mixture of jnana or karma, like the rays of the sun unmixed with the clouds. So okay, we've done it. That's practically 15 minutes. Now here's a third 15 minutes, is that someone close to you, meaning physically close to you, anyone, just turn to that person and in twos, and you have 15 minutes to memorize this verse. But if you two are together, what will you do in the 15 minutes? You take a break, memorize another verse. Okay, 15 minutes. Okay. Who didn't know it before and more or less know it now and would like to say it? Raise your hand. Yes. But do we have a microphone to pass around? Okay, go ahead. Stand up, please. And what's your name? Still? Okay. Stand up. Anand. Does that make it more difficult or less difficult? Say.
Akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udaradi trivena bhakti yogena yajatam purusham param.
Very nice, thank you. Who else? Wait, some big boys too. Yes, big boy in the back, yes. Yeah. Did you know it before? No. And what's your name?
Anjane.
Anjani.
Yeah. Akamah sarva kamocha, akamah sarva kamocha, mokshakama udaradhi, mokshakama udaradhi, tivrena bhakti yogena, yajeta purusham param.
You get double credit. Now, I know some of you will have someone talking on their Bluetooth into your ear, but digital detox. Okay, Mataji, you're on. One of you raise your hand. Yamuna Leela Mataji, you ready? Okay, go ahead. Okay, you have to say it again, please.
I said already. Again?
Yeah.
Akama sarva kamova moksha kama udaradi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param.
What does Tivrena mean?
With great force.
With great force. The bhakti should be with great force. That means with fixed determination. Okay, little one. Little flower. We can't resist.
Akama sarva kamava moksha kama udhara Tivrena Bhakti Yogena Yajeta Purusham Param.
Thank you very much. How did you get so sincere? Did you carry it from your last life? Or do you remember who you were in your last life? No. Okay. Okay, one more. Okay. Okay, two more. Okay. First little and then big. Next size. Big size after. You're number two. Okay, go ahead.
Akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udaradhi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param.
Very nice. Yes, Prabhu.
Akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udaradi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param.
Thank you, Prabhu. Very good. Okay, last. Did you know it before?
Akama sarva kamo va moksha kama udaradhi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param.
Okay. Okay. Now, a 15-minute section. But I cheated. I made it 16 minutes. But don't tell anyone. Now, the reason why Srila Sukadeva Goswami says this in the third chapter of the second canto, why he says this verse, because Maharaj Parikshit was cursed, and he was about to die due to that curse within 7 days. So he asked the sages present, what should I do during my remaining time in this world? And as usual, what happens is no one could agree. But then Srila Sukadeva Goswami appeared. And when he came, everyone stood up out of respect. And they gave him the seat of honor. And Maharaj Parikshit asked him that question, and everyone else listened. Now, the first canto of the Bhagvatam ends before Srila Sukadeva Goswami, who is the speaker of the Bhagvatam, has said anything. But it begins with his words. And he very clearly, very powerfully, and very directly, he criticizes those people who are materialistically inclined and keep their minds just focused on acquiring things and just on family life, only on that. And then he turns to the positive. We'll explain it in brief because we'll have to go through the third chapter. And then he starts explaining the positive, that what you should do, what everyone should do in life or even at the point of death is here, Tasmad Bharata Sarvatma, Bhagavan Hari Ishvara, Sotavyas Kirtitavyas Chas, Smarantyas Ches Chete Bhayam. That if you want to become free from fear, and this world is a place of fearfulness, if you want to become free from fear, then you should hear about, chant about, and remember always the Supreme Lord, continuously. And then he talks about Khatvanga Maharaj, who just found out, just a moment before he was going to pass away, that his death was soon. He was encouraging Maharaj Parikshit that now you have enough time to always chant. And that's what he did. He sat there until the very end and heard about Krishna. And then he takes a different tact. He moves in a different direction. Sukadeva Goswami does. And he explains that one should leave home. Now, obviously, this isn't what everyone should immediately do and just stay here at this camp forever. But he explains a process. And this process is more an intellectually oriented process, more like Jnana Yoga. He says, leave home immediately, go to the forest, sit and chant Om, and focus your attention on the Supreme Lord, but in a specific way. And that specific way is to see everything in the world of matter, everything in the universe, see it in relationship with Krishna. Because this allows you to change the mind from seeing only material things to seeing Krishna. Because when you see the material things, you see them in relationship with Krishna. So there's a shift that can take place. And so much of the Bhagavatam actually discusses this shift. How to see the world of matter in relationship to Krishna. And in one sense, the best thing that we can do in this world, or in one sense, the most we can do in this world, is to use Nirbandha Krishna Sambandha Yukta Vairagya Uchite, see everything in the world of matter in relationship to Krishna and use it in Krishna's service somehow or another. So in this chapter, which Prabhupada entitled The First Step in God Realization, Sukadeva Goswami explains how, and he was a completely detached person, and he would just wander. And we'll speak about this a little bit later tomorrow. The mood of a completely detached person just wandering and depending on Krishna. Just to develop that mood that I am dependent on Krishna. So he explains how to see the mountains. There are mountains outside here. These are Krishna's bones. How to see the birds flying in the sky as Krishna's artistic sense. How to see everything, the rivers as the veins, the blood flowing through the veins of the Virat Rupa. And in this way, changing our vision from seeing matter to seeing Krishna in everything, in every circumstance. Because, and why is this necessary? Is because if we don't see Krishna, if we don't look at objects of this world, whether it's the mountains or the wood or the buildings or our own body, if we don't see, or our own smartphones, if we don't see them in relationship with Krishna, we'll see them just as things for our own enjoyment, as objects for our own enjoyment, our own pleasure. And that is called Maya. Because if we see things as if it's meant for our pleasure, it's exactly opposite to seeing things as if they're meant for Krishna's pleasure. And then we're competing with Krishna. And if you compete with Krishna, you will lose. But don't worry, only 100% of the time. A confirmed cry from the back. Yeah, in the material world, people compete with Krishna. And ultimately, everyone, of course, is defeated. But then in the second chapter, and degraded by that vision of seeing things separate from Krishna. But in the second chapter, Sukadeva Goswami moves it to a different level, the talk. Not to see matter in relationship with Krishna, but he says, better than that, you meditate on Krishna in the heart. You practice Ashtanga Yoga, and you place Krishna through the process of the 8 limbs of Yam, Niyam, Asana, and what's next? Pratyahara, and then Dhyan, Dharan, and then Samadhi. By this practice, because people, when they think of yoga nowadays, it's just bodily exercise to keep the body fit for material pleasure, but that is not yoga. Yoga means ultimately to meditate on the Supreme Lord. And Sukadeva Goswami describes this beautiful Lord who is within everyone's heart. You and you and you, the older, the younger, everyone's heart. He's there now. And we're unconscious of him. But he is conscious of us. And he's waiting for us to turn to him. So instead of just focusing the consciousness outside and seeing Krishna in everything outside, you know what 2 means? That's your second chance. And you know what happens when we get up to 3? You don't want to find out. So, better than seeing Krishna outside is seeing him inside. And if you can see always Krishna inside, and you know that Krishna is always with you inside, and he's all powerful, and he's all beautiful, what do you have to fear in this world? So he explains this, and he explains the beauty of Krishna, his beautiful lotus feet, his beautiful chest, his beautiful garland, his beautiful lotus eyes, his beautiful helmet, his beautiful smile. And then he explains that the yogi, by doing this, he can even leave this world by his own will at any time he likes. And sometimes, he explains, that yogis take this process of going through the universe, touring the universe, and just seeing what every situation is like, what every planet is like, going from place to place and observing this and that, and then gradually, because everything in the material universe must one day end, gradually, by his yogic powers, he goes to the higher planets, then to the highest planets, and then he can go back to, because by meditating on the supersoul, because the supersoul doesn't exist in the spiritual world. So if he has non-devotee association, if he has impersonalist association, he can actually merge into Brahman if he likes. Or if he has devotee association and has a desire to go to the spiritual world, he can go there. But at the end of the second chapter, thank you. At the end of the second chapter, Sukadeva Goswami explains that really the purpose of everything is bhakti. Whether it's seeing the Supreme Lord in matter or focusing the consciousness on him in the heart, the purpose is bhakti, is to develop a relationship with him, a loving, serving relationship with him, not because we have to, but because we, out of love, out of affection. But then the third chapter begins with Sukadeva Goswami. After bhakti is glorified at the end of the second chapter, Sukadeva Goswami says, now I have answered your question. What to do when you have a limited time. Of course, none of us have a limited time in this world, but what to do if one happens to be one of those who has a limited time in this world. He explains he said, now I've answered your question, what to do. You should always focus your consciousness and bhakti on the Lord. But a question arises still. And that question is, well, what? I can say, yes, this is the best thing. But what happens if I have material desires? If I'm honest with myself and I say, I have this desire and I have that desire and I have this desire. And sometimes we want to fulfill those desires, but sometimes out of purva sanskaras, previous impressions, we don't really want them, but they drive us just like we're driving a car by the steering wheel. They drive us in our activities. So what about such a person? So in the beginning of the chapter, third chapter, Sukadeva Goswami explains, he explains the path of karma kanda. That if you have this material desire, you worship this devata. And if you have that material desire, you worship this powerful personality of Godhead. Personality, not of the Supreme Lord. All devata worship. Materialistic devata worship, but what to do, the Vedic system is so amazing that everyone, regardless of their position, they're included in such a way that they'll become elevated. But then it comes to this 10th verse of the third chapter. Akama sarva kamava moksha kama. Whether you're one of those persons who is akama, where your heart is really pure and you really love Krishna already, and maybe you want to intensify that love, but you don't want anything of this material world. You don't even want freedom from the sufferings of this material world. If you're akama, or if your love for Krishna perfect, or if you're sarvakama, if you're filled with material desires, or if you're mokshakama, if you just want to get free from it all, you've had enough. If you're a yogi, a jnani, or a materialistic person filled with desires, it doesn't make any difference. You should worship that Supreme Lord. This is the context in which this verse is spoken. After describing these different paths, he says, whatever your situation is, you please worship the Supreme Lord. And the more tivra, the more intense, the more serious, then whatever other obstacles, what other desires, they'll be washed away because Krishna is all attractive. And the closer we get to him, the more attracted we will be to him. Pushing away everything else. So it's not that pushing away everything else and I'll have to give it up like this and I'm holding on to it. It's pulling like that. No. It's more like this. I want Krishna. Because he's all attractive. And the satisfaction, the depth of satisfaction that we're all longing for, and this isn't for the younger ones to hear really, but longing for in a world of disappointment. It comes to the heart. The younger ones, what they have to do, they have to go out into the material world and prove themselves, and as much as they practically can, do it for Krishna's pleasure, become the prime minister and the president and the who's the richest person nowadays in the world? Who? Oh, of course. He's like knocked Bill Gates out and he's gotten all the... And who's the richest person in India? Become like them. This is for the younger people. Yes, and do it for Krishna. Become, who's the best cricketer nowadays? It used to be Sachin, I'm so old. Who? How do you know? You didn't even wait one moment. You can't defeat someone from Delhi. Okay, I accept it. Yeah, just if we can become attracted to Krishna, then our life is perfect. Now, even though we're a little bit over, I almost said we're a little bit older, but that wouldn't be true coming from my mouth. It's not a little bit. It's a lot older. We will take a 15-minute break.